This is being presented by for all the District 5960 Rotarians, and this is being done by initiative by the District Ethics Committee. And so Bruce Moreland and myself will be doing the first part, and then Bruce McKenzie will join me for the later part. So now we'll start with these introductions, and we'll talk a little bit about Braver Angels. We'll talk about the With Malice Towards None initiative, give a little overview. Then we'll talk about the pledge. We'll talk about the Braver Angels core values and the Rotary 4-way test and how they relate to each other. Talk about psychological biases, and we'll do the values exercise. That'll be co-moderated by Bruce McKenzie and myself. And then we'll do checkout. By the way, Bruce and myself are all members of the Braver Angels organization. Now, Braver Angels was actually started as the Better Angels. Two individuals in 2018 came up with the idea that America is just too polarized, and they were seeking inspiration from Lincoln's first inaugural address, where he was calling on our better angels of our nature. However, with a copyright problem, that name was changed to Braver Angels, which is a citizens organization uniting red and blue Americans in a working alliance. But the purpose is to depolarize America. We try to understand each other's point of view, even if we don't agree with it. We engage those we disagree with, looking for common ground and ways to work together. And we support principles that bring us together rather than divide us. Now, we've got a real challenge because on November 4th, the day after the presidential election, that could be the most divisive day in modern history, no matter who wins. So given our current national stress and the anticipated antagonisms of the presidential campaign, the days and weeks after the election are likely to bring a historical level of polarization. Again, no matter who wins. 60 million Americans, give or take, will be very upset with another 60 million, and political leaders may feed the anger and contempt. So Braver Angels organization came up with the idea we need to do something, and so they were inspired by Lincoln's second inaugural, where he was calling to heal the wounds of the Civil War with malice towards none and with charity for all. Because after the election is determined, as this little graph shows, or figure shows, we're going to have lots of people happy, and we're going to have some people who are very distressed and angry, no matter who wins. So what we'll possibly see is what are called the 4 horsemen of polarization: stereotyping, dismissing, ridiculing, or showing contempt. Now, whether we win or lose, we'll be tempted to do some stereotyping, saying those people who all voted the same way because they are the same kind of people, there's no need to understand them in a complex way. Or maybe using dismissing. Most people on the other side didn't know what they were voting for. And losers may say, they're clueless as their leaders run our country into the ground. And winners may say, we're in charge now, they have nothing to contribute. Or ridiculing, they are fools, let them eat their MAGA hats. Or let them eat their face masks. Or we may show contempt, just thinking they are ignorant dupes or just plain hypocrites. These are things we want to avoid. Because this could be negative, have real consequences, because on our personal life, there could be conflict, withdrawal, or cutoffs with our family members, friends and neighbors, and coworkers who voted the other way and won't admit their error. Will have potential effect on civil engagement. People could become warriors, oppositional guerrilla fighters, or simply alienated bystanders. So we have an opportunity to be proactive to head off a train wreck by inviting Americans to consider how they want to regard and treat those on the other side of the election. Or we can pre-commit to participating in healing activities after the election. Now, with Malice Towards None is really sort of 3 parts. Before the election, like tonight, we'll have this kind of meeting. We'll do some preparation. After the election, there will be a second series of meetings separate meetings for those who are happy and those who are not so happy. There would be separate meetings, just to have a chance to vent a little bit or whatever to get past that. Those will be structured workshops put together by Braver Angels. And then following that, there'll be a third stage where people will get together and do another structured workshop by Braver Angels. So to be clear, with Malice Towards None, it's not about covering over strong political differences or encouraging people to support whoever wins the election. With Malice Towards None is about the commitment to respect the humanity of those who differ from us and to forge connections for civic work across differences. Now, Braver Angels has come up with this with Malice Toward None pledge that we are asking people to do. It says, regardless of how the election turns out, I will not hold hate, disdain, or ridicule for those who voted differently from me. Whether I am pleased or upset about the outcome, I will seek to understand the concerns and aspirations of those who voted differently, and will look for opportunities to work with people with whom I disagree. If you are so inclined, we would encourage you to sign the pledge, that link that which will be posted in the chat box. Now, Braver Angels has some core values which are very much aligned with the Rotary four-way test, because we want to show respect. So we will talk about our fellow citizens on the other side with respect for their intelligence and goodwill. We will avoid characterizing them as deserving our disdain or pity. We'll also show humility. We will talk about our side with the knowledge that our leaders are not perfect and that our current policy solutions are not complete answers to our nation's complex problems. We will hopefully show honesty. We will allow people to feel what they are feeling about the election. We will not ask them to hide their satisfaction and joy if their side won, or their grief and anger if their side lost. We will demonstrate responsible citizenship. We will emphasize that it's up to all of us, we the people, to depolarize our politics and meet our common challenges. Now that's, like I said, very complimentary to the four-way test. Do all the things we think, say, and do, is it true? Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Very much complimentary organizations in that regard. Now, John Huco, General Secretary and CEO of Rotary International, is also a Braver Angels member. He said, regardless of who wins the 2020 election, it will be up to us as citizens and civic leaders to renew our commitment to building goodwill and civic friendships. That's why I'm supporting the With Malice Towards None's initiative by Braver Angels. I encourage civic leaders everywhere to join and get involved. So on to Bruce. Marlon will take it from here.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to be talking about polarization and the way we look at things. And we focus on different things and we listen to different sources. And this all causes us to work in echo chambers that tend to reinforce our own thinking by showing us what we already know, but probably a little stronger as it leads us off into the extremist points of view. And all groups are subject to this because of the way the artificial intelligence algorithms are driving our social media, which is a major source of information. Now, it's useful to understand that there's a difference between the policies that we support and the reasons that we use to get to those policies. Jonathan Haidt, the author of The Righteous Mind, is running a project called yourmorals.org, and they argue that humans have 6 moral foundations through which we view politics and policy, and that those moral foundations guide our political preferences. So what are these? Well, we have one on care and harm, and we have one on fairness, what's fair and what's cheating. We have one for loyalty and betrayal. We have authority versus subversion. We have sanctity versus degradation, and liberty versus oppression. And each of those has triggers that make us think about that. So if we see pictures of baby seals, we might experience care and harm. If we see somebody abusing a broken vending machine, we may think that that's either fairness or cheating, depending on what we think they're doing with it. Loyalty or betrayal. A lot of people are very loyal to sports teams or nations, this loyalty to group. We have respect for authority or subversion. And a lot of times that's the hierarchical nature of our societies. It means that we're willing to let someone else be the expert and we'll just kind of do what they suggest we do. It's what lets us recognize an expert in medicine, for example. We have sanctity and degradation, and these are taboo ideas like communism and racism. And then we have liberty and oppression, where we have tyrants and bullies and dominators and all of the things that go into suppressing liberty in the name of a greater good. All of these triggers are things that might make you think in that dimension with these kinds of emotions. And the trick to remember is what Jonathan Haidt discovered about those foundations is that liberals have a different foundation for their morality than conservatives do. And what they found was that people who self-identified as liberals tended to focus on care and fairness and liberty as their core values when they're thinking about a situation, whereas people who self-identified as conservatives were much more evenly weighed out. They didn't pick on just one or a few. They were watching all six. So that's how they end up distinguishing a little bit between the two types of worldview. And how that shows up in our chart is that if you're a liberal or a conservative, blue or a red, you're going to worry about the baby. You're going to feel a need for care. You're going to feel a need for fairness, but you're more likely to be worried about loyalty to group, which might come across as your favorite football team, but it might also come across as your socioeconomic group. You've got authority and subversion. This is the law and order issue. It's the whether we respect science or not. And it's kind of interesting how that plays out, obviously. Sanctity is taboo ideas. Jonathan Haidt likes to note that both blues and reds pay attention to this. It's just that blues pay more attention to the food they consume, and reds pay more attention to other issues, smoking and drinking. Liberty and oppression, everybody pays attention to that because at the end, none of us particularly are favorably inclined toward being bullied. So how does that play into all this? Well, in addition to that problem, we have something else going on, and that's confirmation bias. And that is that we favor things that confirm our existing beliefs. I'm a trained mathematician and scientist, and so part of my life has been trained in how to avoid confirmation bias. So I go in very, very much more skeptically than other people might, because we are primed to see and agree with fit our preconceptions. In fact, we'll seek that out. We'll go to the news channel, and if they're talking about something we don't believe, we'll skip past it because we want to hear something else. The other thing we can do is with confirmation bias, we can ignore and dismiss information that conflicts with our preconceived notions. It's a very hard thing to get over with. And in general, we start with a theory, we find evidence to support it. That's not the way science works, but it is the way a lot of our minds work. We have an idea and then we find evidence to support that idea, and that makes us feel stronger about our idea, and it makes it easier to find evidence, and you get into a tight loop of confirmation bias. So to counteract its influence, we have to presume ourselves wrong until proven right. And we have to think about our ideas and beliefs as software or a mechanism we're trying to find problems with rather than just things to be defended. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person for you to fool. That's Richard Feynman, a famous physicist. Little levity. Did you read my paper on confirmation bias? And the respondent says, yes, but it only proved what I already knew. That's not the way it works, but sometimes in the office at the water cooler, it will work that way. So another thing that goes on is the sources that we find news in. And this research suggested that Democrats and people who lean Democratic tend to listen to all of these channels, whereas Republicans and people who lean Republican tend to focus heavily on Fox News and then follow up with a slight, side palate cleanser, if you will, of ABC, CBS, Hannity, and NBC. And one of the things I tell people is, in the 60s, there was only one news channel. It was called CBS, NBC, ABC, and they only differed in the commercials. But the story they were telling was pretty consistent across all three channels. So as a nation, we had a shared view of what reality was. It's just some of us saw that flavored with Ford commercials and some saw Chevy commercials. Well, now you can see that there's a whole channel of news information which is being pretty much ignored on this side, just like there are news channels on this side, like PBS, that are being ignored by this side. And this is an echo chamber. An echo chamber is when what you're mostly hearing is what you've been saying, and it bounces off the walls and come back to you. I've done a lot of computer work with artificial intelligence, and you probably have heard of the term AI, artificial intelligence, and algorithms, which are tools that Facebook and Twitter use to give us back posts that are similar to the ones we've liked. So when you like a post, Facebook notices that and then will feed you more posts like that because you'll want to follow that trail. It's a digital echo chamber. It's an echo chamber enhanced by artificial intelligence algorithms. And it's like living in a bubble. And that is confirmation bias on steroids. It's as if you had a small thought and a chorus of angels suddenly appeared in the street to sing that thought at you. And you would, it would just reinforce your own belief. Now, the last thing that goes into this problem that we've got is the Dunning-Kruger effect. And what the Dunning-Kruger effect is that the more you know, the less confident you're likely to be. Because when you only know a little bit, you only have a simple idea of how things are. And you don't give a lot of credence to people who appear confident but only have superficial knowledge. You shouldn't do that. You've got to be careful, because right now, every time I post something, there are 40,000 experts who post counter stories to it. And a lot of them don't have the background, but they certainly have the audience. Also, because experts know how much they don't know, they tend to underestimate. So the problem with this is the Dunning-Kruger effect makes people who are just novices in something feel like they're experts, whereas the reverse of that, the more you know about a subject, the more you are able to see the holes in the subject, know where the weaknesses are, put a lot more emphasis on being thoughtful about what you think you know. So there's this kind of curve where blissful ignorance, you learn a little bit about it and you're extremely confident, I can handle this. And then in education industry, we say, there's your bachelor's degree, you think you know it all. Actually, we tell sophomores that they think they know it all. By the time you get down to your master's level, you've started to study enough and you realize how much there is that you don't know. And then when you get up to the PhD level and beyond postdoc work, you really have the right to be an expert. You've earned it, you've got the knowledge and the background. And that is a real problem in the social media world, because we don't have a way to validate who are the experts. So the problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are so certain of themselves, and wiser people are so full of doubts. Bertrand Russell. And the common saying was, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. That's why it's a dangerous thing. The result of all this is that people with superficial knowledge think they are informed. They think they're experts. They think if they can quote another blog, they're way ahead of the curve. And people who don't agree with them then must be misinformed or duped and the object of pity. What's all this doing to us? Well, we've become increasingly divided. We've reached the point where Republicans have a negative view of Democrats. Democrats have a very negative view of Republicans. And interestingly, political affiliation has replaced religion as the primary barrier to having a new member of the family come in. So when you bring your fiance or your proposed spouse home, if they're in the wrong political party, they're going to get rejection like they used to get by being in the wrong religion. So that's how we end up with Malice Toward None and the flow that we talked about earlier. And Rick, this is where you take over.
Back up one, Bruce.
Yep.
As I said before, this is the pre-election event, just to kind of get a little background on what's going on. After the election, there'll be sessions for the people who are happy and those people who are not so happy. And then after that, for those people who choose, they can put those two together. Those steps 2 and 3 are structured workshops by Braver Angels. And the structured programs that I've been involved in, they all seem to be very good in terms of keeping people within ground rules and so forth, and people walking away feeling that they've been heard and have learned something. So
I would say one more thing before Rick shares his screen. This rejoin meeting, when I'm talking about with Malice Toward None with organizations, I tell them this is where you get back. You can clear the air because you've learned skills here on how to not be gloating or in despair. You can get back together and use those skills to rejoin your mission as an organization, whether you're a church or a service club or a college. That rejoin meeting, that fourth meeting, lets you press on to do what you're supposed to be doing instead of being torn up by the gloom and doom and open change.
So next we'll have a values exercise, but first, if people have some questions, now would be a good time to ask them. So remember, hands up in the participants there, checkbox down below, and we'll start there. Bruce, when you want to stop sharing your screen?
Sure.
So any questions out there?
I hear that protection is an important value for you.
Thank you. Somebody else? Remember, it doesn't have to be a long sentence. Robert Timmons.
I hear in your statement that the issue of our collective humanity is important.
Wow. Jack Haugen.
Actually, Mary.
It's actually Mary, but we're together.
I'm Jack.
I hear that with freedom comes responsibility.
Ah, interesting. There are other hands raised?
Alan,
I hear
Somebody?
others before self.
Ellen Lupker, your hand was up.
I hear what scientists are telling us about the danger of COVID and that you value doing what you can to help prevent this infection from harming others.
Yeah, you really want to focus on the value. Starting with the scientists could put some people off. So you start with the value, acknowledge the value. Bruce Robb, you had your hand up. You need to unmute yourself, Bruce. Okay.
I found the value in human life is precious.
Ah, interesting. I'm now going to read the red statement. And again, you want to be a switch hitter here, regardless of your political identity, be a switch hitter and work to understand the other point of view if you're a blue, or if you're a red, understanding your own point of view. So from the red perspective, I'll read this statement. COVID-19 is like the flu. Being mandated to wear a mask is an infringement on my liberties. Dr. Beth Gilfett.
I hear that you value personal freedom.
Yeah. Paul McGinnis.
Yeah, I hear a valuing of the independence that was the foundation of our country.
Ah. You see another hand raised there?
Barbara,
I wrote I hear you saying that you value individual freedom and trusting each person to make the correct decision.
Anybody who's not participated yet?
I don't see any blue hands.
So the how you should
Kathy?
think about this is if even if you don't think one way or the other, you might want to try to put yourself in your shoes of that person or that perspective, saying, if I had that perspective, what would I be valuing? Bruce McKenzie, you've muted yourself.
Yeah, Kathy Montaigne wanted to make a comment.
I'm looking at the, oops, wait a minute. I guess I'm unmuted. Looking at the core values list on the back, I looked at this too shall pass. It's like the
Marlene.
I hear that you honor personal choice.
Interesting.
Jack Hogan?
If I understand you correctly, that wearing a mask is an infringement of your liberties without taking into account the impact on others.
That's good, Jack. You know, you've kind of gone to the next step of putting in some additional features rather than just focusing on the value itself. You know,
Like the
I hear ya.
value that could be for fairness, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, let's try to go down to the underlying value.
Somebody else? Well, Rick is going to lead you through the next exercise of statements. He's going to be talking about the economy.
Yeah, this is obviously another big issue. It's related to the coronavirus, but you know, the blue. I'm going to state actually both perspectives, and then we don't need to take it in turn. We can just say I think the person from the blue perspective would be valuing such, or you could say the person with the red perspective may be valuing something. So from the blue perspective, you know, a serious stimulus is needed. People, industries, states, and local governments need to be propped up. And red perspective, they may say we've already done enough to boost the economy. People who are concerned about the deficit and federal debt, they may say maybe we've done too much. Let's see. So who do we have that might be interested in thinking about what value are we thinking about, one perspective or the other? You can pick either one first, whichever one you think you have an idea on. And I'll go to gallery view for me if I can. So I can see people who's got, I see Mary Haugen's got her hand up.
I hear in the red perspective that people need to take care of themselves and figure out how they individually can solve their own problems.
And the underlying value there that you see,
Individualism.
individualism, okay?
Good.
And do I see another hand? I see Patsy Bloom, or whatever, Patsy. I have to unmute yourself. We see your lips moving, but I'm not hearing anything. For some reason, your mic is not working right.
Yeah, she's unmuted.
Shane Sattler has his hand up.
All right.
Okay,
I said I appreciate your valuing of excellence and independence. That is in reaction to the red perspective.
Okay.
Robert Timmons has his hand up.
Yeah, I would say in the blue perspective, I hear that you value the whole.
Yeah.
Sort of a balance.
and who else?
Dr. Gilwith? Gilfit?
Oh,
Thank you. On the red perspective, I hear that you're worried about long-term future of our economy.
and I see Rick Heidick's got your hand up.
Yeah, and the blue, I hear that in time of national crisis, that you feel the government has a role to protect individuals.
And the value there would be, can you,
It'd be humanity.
okay, good. Any other perspectives out there?
Barbara Warnson has her hand raised.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
I responded to the blue in terms of compassion and humanity. I wrote, I understand that you value the stimulus and want to help those who've been hit hardest, who may not have the most resources. I'm kind of, maybe that's too much.
Mhm.
Well, you did say the value of compassion and so forth. That would be an underlying value. Yeah. And I see Patsy, you got your voice working now? No, for some reason it's still not working. Bummer. Do we have any other hands? There are no really right or wrong answers, so don't be afraid of
I
you
have
know,
one.
just feeling. Okay, Marlene?
Under the blue perspective, I hear that you value community.
Community?
Mhm.
Mhm.
So,
We're all in this together.
We're all in this together. That's a really good way to put that, Marlene. That's what I use when I'm talking with people that sometimes go, you're on
Kim
your
Cobb. Kim Cobb has her hand up.
For the red perspective, perhaps something, I hear you saying that you think we may have done harm.
and the underlying value for that might be,
Well, I'm actually I have in my mind the top line of your chart, not the vertical line on the side. So I'm thinking the care and harm one. I don't know which one that went with, so.
yeah,
This is Ted Johnson. Can I add?
sure, go ahead, Ted.
For blue, I hear that you are are very concerned about caring, and you're considerate of other people. So I'm thinking of caring and considerate. I don't know how you say it, but
Yeah, so basically the value would be, care for others. Yeah,
yes,
compassion for others, whatever. Yeah,
yeah, compassion would be a good one. Yep.
yeah. So any other hands out there? If not, we will move on to the next one, but going once, going to, oh, Patricia, do you see your hand? Yes, Patricia. You gotta unmute yourself.
Yeah, I
There
got
you
it. Yeah, I just got. Well, from the red perspective, I was thinking that maybe the perspective would be that trust of the individual to take care of themselves instead of the government taking care of them. The trust of the individual. So would the value be trust and authority? Maybe the authority of the individual to take care of themselves.
Anybody else for a hand up? Going once, going twice. Okay, then we'll move on to the third major issue. And back to Bruce McKenzie.
Okay, we're going to be talking about racial justice versus law and order here. And I'll do it a little differently than Rick. I'll start with the blue statement for you to think about. And mine may be a little bit different than what you see on the screen. So think about this from the blue perspective. And again, be switch hitters here. If you're red, you can respond if you hear a value. Likewise, the blue, if it's important to understand your own values. Our country was founded on the idea that all are equal before the law. And I'm concerned that police officers are disproportionately using violence against people of color.
Got a number of shy people here tonight.
Yeah, no hands up. Oh, Kim Cobb.
Yes, hear you saying that you feel that system is not fair right now.
So a fairness issue, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
Shane Sattler, I see your hand.
I hear you valuing the ideas of equality and justice.
Barb?
On this one, I had the same thing for both the blue and the red, which was the values of humanity and justice and integrity.
This is important to both.
Yeah, I think so. More the.
So there's some common values here that we can work with.
Right.
Robert Timmons.
Yeah, in the blue perspective, I hear you valuing respect.
Might that also be, from a red perspective, respect for the law enforcement? I think
Dr. Beth,
that might be another one that goes both ways.
maybe the first part of that, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. First part of that perspective.
Beth Giltfit.
From the red perspective, I hear that you value loyalty to authority.
Jack Hogan, I see your hand.
Yeah, I think the blue perspective, equality and justice.
Yeah, this goes back to the conversation about respect, that, the blue can be.
You cut out there, Rick.
Yeah, sorry. This goes back to the conversation about respect, where respect, blue could be respect for the individual. What I had was for red, is I hear that you value order and respect for the law.
Mm-hmm. You know, and that's an interesting point. You know, the values are why we believe something. The policies that we want to see enacted really are the what, how we affect that value. And so what you just said there, Rick, is really important, because in both instances, you can see that the value, the common value is respect here, and that how one party may move forward with a policy of respect for the law about equality, the other party may move forward with respect to the law as authority. So, you know, that's why it's never good to be arguing about bottom values, but understanding those values and then understanding how they lead to a particular policy. And then we can start working on how we differ on the policy. We'll argue about policy, the what, all day long. And we should, because affecting those values is what government is all about. But we can't be arguing about the fundamental value itself, because we both hold that value. That's not incorrect. What we need to do is work on how we do the details. The devil's always in the detail, right? Okay, is there another hand up?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay, you want to move to the climate change now?
Okay.
I'm going to run away for this one.
Okay. Well, obviously, this is another one that's highly controversial. And again, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it my way. I may not be Frank Sinatra, but I'll let people jump in on either the blue or the red perspective as they choose. Because on the blue perspective, the statement could be that climate change is real, caused by man's release of carbon dioxide from burning fossil fuel, and it's urgent we do something about it to prevent enormous future changes in the earth as we know it. On the other hand, the red perspective, there are many who feel that it's a hoax, that climate change is always changing, so maybe we don't need to do anything about it. So go back to, okay, so values. What underlying values might people have? What are they? What are they thinking? Not the statement, but what's underneath their thoughts? What's driving them? Bruce, Marlon, I see your hand up.
Yes.
You can participate too.
In the blue perspective, what I hear is so you respect the authorities that tell you that climate change is real, which is, to me, is a little bit outside of the playbook for the blue, but it's interesting. So that's why I would point it out to them. I would say, this is an example. You're trusting authorities. So that would be authority subversion is the perspective.
And others? Mary Augen?
I see in the blue perspective that you see a responsibility for preserving the future.
Can anybody put themselves in the shoes of the red perspective? If you were in their shoes, walking there in their moccasins. Barbara Warrenson?
Again, when I wrote, one of the values that was on the handout you sent us was trusting your gut. So I think I would say, I hear that you want to have the freedom to trust your gut and give people a chance to make things right.
Now, I don't know if this was one on the list, but one from the red perspective could be, I'm not sure how to put it, but whether it be nostalgia or want, prefer to see the way things used to be. That is a value for consistency or something. Jack Hogan?
Rick, I see the red perspective as being contradictory. It's a hoax, meaning there's no value to it. But the other hand, acknowledging that climate is always changing, but not going deeper to find the reason. So if anyone wants to add to that, it's probably not where you're at on this question from a value perspective, but I see that statement as very confusing.
Actually,
Contradictory.
Yeah,
Jack, let me jump in here. What he's saying is man-caused climate change is a hoax because the climate is always changing. Does that make more sense? In other words, what he's calling a hoax is not that the climate is changing, but that it's caused by man's release of carbon dioxide.
Yeah, maybe the statement's confusing, but Jack, can you go beneath that of what value there might be that who might express that opinion?
I'm not certain I can articulate that. I just jumped to the four-way test.
Good place to start.
Yeah, I'm not certain I have the capacity to articulate that because I'm still hung up on it, and I don't care if it's a perceived hoax, but acknowledgement in the same sentence that climate is always changing. Yes, it is, regardless of why or who. Yeah, Mary just pointed out how that follows the blue perspective.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Okay, I see Rick Hedrick's got your hand up, and then Claire after that.
Yeah, and this goes in line with what Jack was talking about. And I was coming at this as that I hear that you have faith in natural change that can't be explained away by scientific theory.
Okay, and Claire, are you ready?
Yeah, from the red perspective, I hear what you're saying is that you think this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Paul Perez has his hand up.
I would say that from the red perspective, what you're saying is that you're loyal to what we've done as as a world, and the climate is always changing. So just stay loyal, consistent with what we've done to this point.
Any other hands on this issue? Ted Johnson.
I'm not sure how to say it, but I'm looking at the list of that was given to us. One of them on there that comes to my mind is for the red perspective, is some way of saying, it seems to me that you believe in the endurance of ourselves and our government.
You say believe in endurance?
Endurance.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's focus on that.
Okay, Marlene, I see your hand.
Well, from the red perspective, it's I don't know what the value would be, but it seems as though the statement is I can't do anything about it, so why bother?
Okay.
I don't know if that's a value, but that's an opinion, and that's probably not what I should be saying. But it's like, yeah, I think it's. So why do we even bother talking about it? It's irrelevant is what I see. But
Yeah.
I don't know what the value would be. Maybe not any, maybe that's not a good statement.
Can I throw in a statement here?
Okay, I see, okay, David, you're talking, sir. You got something?
Yeah,
And then Carol and Robert next.
the climate's changing, but back in the 1300s, 1400s, it was really warmer than it is now. And they didn't have the same fossil fuel problem that you're alleging.
Okay, moving on to Carol.
Right. I have to apologize because I forgot to print out the list, the handout that you sent to us today. So I'm having a little trouble with this one. Somehow it doesn't match the others because the blue perspective is giving a series of observations and the red perspective is just denying it. So that's why I'm just think it doesn't work as well as all the other exercises we've done. What it reminds me of is, and I don't think it's a value, but I think it's like the first stage of grief is denial, that it can't be. It's a, you know, so I'm struggling with this, but I just felt that somehow this one isn't working as well as the others did. And there should be something different in the red perspective. Probably somebody who comes up with reasons like the fellow before me of saying, well, this happened before or something like that. That's all I have to say.
Okay. And Robert Timmons is next. Can we try to dig down into values where we can? Robert?
Yeah. You know what?
Beth next.
In the red perspective, I'm hearing openness to ideas. I guess openness would be the value. Because the word hoax is sort of a loaded word, and you know, a media created or created in the discourse, I guess I'd say. So anyway, I'd say openness. I see a value for openness.
Okay. Beth, you next.
From the red perspective, perhaps I'm hearing you say that you want to have the freedom to choose what authorities you will listen to.
Again, it's that resistance to authority. Yeah. Okay. Any other hands? Any other? I see Marlene.
I think curiosity comes in here because it's like an unknown, and from both perspectives, there's curiosity. So climate is always changing. Could be, well, I'm curious, or I could dig deeper into that. And the first one, the blue would be also curiosity, kind of like, what can we do, sort of thing.
Okay, let's do one more. I see a hand for Julie.
From the red perspective, I could see two possible values at play, and they both are similar to each other. And one is patience and the other is faith, that things change as a part of the natural cycle and they will change again.
Okay. Now, as this exercise has shown, it's not very easy to get down to underlying values. So that's always a challenge, so that when someone says something to you, that we don't just jump to either attack or agree, but if we can find out where the person is coming from, maybe we can find common ground. Like I said, I think this is the difficulty we've had. Some of you coming out with getting right down to the values does demonstrate the difficulty of this issue. So with that, Bruce, can we do some connections and wrapping up and such exercise? Bruce McKenzie? You're muted.
I always forget that. Thank you. You bet. Before we finish up, I'd like to share some Braver Angels thoughts about the importance of hearing other people's values that we've picked up as a result of doing a number of workshops around the country. First of all, recognizing another's values is not just being high-minded, it's pragmatic. Many of the differences today have been around in some form since the founding of our country, and they're not going to disappear. There will always be a group that wants change, and there's always going to be a group that prefers the status quo. And to think that we're going to put one side away in one way or another just is not real good thinking. The current whipsaw approach to polarized policymaking leads to undoing each side's policies every 4 years, it seems like. And the result is paralysis and cynicism about government. As a recent workshop participant said, you know, neither side is going to vanquish the other. So we better figure out how to get along and run the country together. So that's the first thought I had. Hearing another person's values reflects good listening skills and will help you come across as more genuine. When you demonstrate you really listened and understood another person, it's more likely they will remember what you say next. Number 3, a long-term goal could be to be able to explain the other side's views in such a way that they would say, you got it. This requires some reading, listening, and suspending disbelief long enough to understand the views of people you differ with. That's why it's a long-term goal for those of you who decide to embrace that. And if you really want to take the road less traveled, practice identifying your inner conservative values if you're a liberal, or your inner liberal side if you're a conservative. For example, my son Matthew is a dyed-in-the-wool liberal, but he is a committed traditionalist. When it comes to holidays and family traditions, he really lets us know he doesn't like it when we do something different at Christmas or Thanksgiving. You know, similar, I know conservatives who are the first to want the newest iPhone or TV, demonstrating a real openness to rapid change. The lesson is the other side resides within all of us, and it's a part of you that you should value. I have 2 questions for you that I would like you to reflect on for a moment as a result of our getting together tonight. The first question is, what did you learn? And the second is, what did you enjoy? And use your raise hand. Take a moment to think about that and use your raise hand button or raise your hand and we'll call on you. George Wickstrom.
You're muted, George.
No, am I muted?
Yeah, there you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. You're 100% right, because we are, I can't understand how anybody can be all conservative or all liberal. It doesn't make any sense at all. I have, one thing I have learned is if you want to talk to somebody else on something that's controversial and you want to open up the discussion, ask a question and you'll find out whether they're agreeing with you or not. And this is where you have to listen and you do not object to what they're saying. I've told many people a story about a friend that I had I played golf with for 15 years. Without making a lot of detail on it, I invited him over to play golf. He brought some guests It was the last week of October, about 5-6 years ago. And when we got done, we went to lunch, and one of the guests said, "Is this climate change playing golf this late in the year?" I said, "No, it's just weather." Anyone and so forth and so on. I said, "But we do know this: 80% of the CO2 in our atmosphere is caused by burning fossil." Guess what? They all just got up and walked out. They didn't thank me for the golf. I paid for everything, and they're gone. I haven't talked with that fellow for 6 years, and I've known him for 15. I saw him 2, 3, 5 times a year. I did business with him, and that's how adamant some people can be. But the way you have to do it is ask a question, because everybody has both sides in there. But how they disagree is the problem.
Yeah, thanks, George. Yes,
that's
thank you. What did you enjoy and what did you learn?
What did I learn? I learned that there's values, for one thing, are not all good. Hitler had values. Mussolini had values. Putin has values. Xi Jinping in China has values, and they're not but the same values that we have. So we have to. I like to find out where a person's coming from, without getting involved in anything controversial. And I guess I've learned that you folks are in the same boat.
Thanks. Patricia McLeese.
There, finally, okay. Yeah, I found a real value in trying to see from the other's perspective. It was very enlightening, and it really just expanded my appreciation of a different perspective. So it wasn't all bad, although okay. And then what did I enjoy? I just enjoyed being stretched and trying to find the value in what is happening. I think that was very enjoyable for me. I really learned a lot. Thank you.
Kim Cobb.
Oh, I learned that it's very hard to consider someone else's values without being judgmental, and and putting my own frame on it. So I got some work to do there, and so I learned that, and I just enjoyed having the conversation. So thank you guys for doing this.
Thank you. Shane Sattler.
Well, the things that occurred to me are that if we're going to have successful dialogue, then we have to not only identify our values and theirs, but we have to find values in common. So finding those common values is one way to keep our conversations safe and constructive. And I guess that, dovetails very nicely into what I enjoyed tonight, which is being in a room, virtual or otherwise, with this many people who disagree with me respectfully is quite fun.
Thank you. Thank you. Michael Cooper.
You're muted, Michael.
There we go. I'm with the Lakeville Rotary Club, and this is the second time I've heard this. In fact, I enjoyed it so much the first time I wanted to hear it again. But I've thought about this a lot. And we talk about this like there's two different perspectives. Like it's a light switch. It's either on or it's off. I think my perspective right now, it's more like a dimmer switch. That it's somewhere in the middle of all that in terms of how I feel about these things. Just let me share one example. There's a pandemic and we shut down the economy, and there's people not working, and should we help them? I feel very committed to wanting to do that. In some states, they're starting it back up and people aren't wanting to go back to work. And that's happening in Minnesota because they're making more money not working. When I hear stories like that, almost like, wait a minute, I was all in favor of the first idea because I'm compassionate. And when I hear things like that, or even big business taking advantage of the money that was going out, And that I almost feel like there's not two groups, but three groups. There's this group in the middle that I think I'm part of. I don't care who gets elected. I'm going to be disappointed.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, Michael, one of the things you're saying is sometimes we will hold two different thoughts at the same time in our mind. Psychologists call that cognitive dissonance. And somehow or another, we've got to balance that in our own minds. So it's not always easy for sure.
Beth Giltvet.
Well, I think what I learned is to look, even though it's really hard, but to really look for the underlying values that people hold, and know that they do have values. Sometimes I think it's easy to say, if it's a value I don't hold, that it's not an important value, but that their values, we may not have the same emphasis on a value, but their values are there. So I really learned about looking harder for the values that other people have in their perspectives. And then what I enjoyed was really hearing about other participants' responses, because I kind of opened my eyes to some values that I would not have considered again with those particular statements. And that was really enlightening. I really enjoyed that. Kind of got my curiosity up.
Good. Carol Arney.
Yeah, what I learned from this is to look into my own history, because I used to be very conservative, and at some point about 30 years ago, I changed. And so if I can look back and remember when I was a conservative, when I fought for Goldwater and voted for Reagan, etc., and try to remember what I was thinking at the time, it helps me to understand the other side. And what I enjoyed was the very idea of being challenged and to learn a new way of approaching all this, because lately I've been in a very liberal bubble and I haven't been challenged at all. I just hear people who agree with me. So this has been very helpful.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Jack Haugen.
I've heard several people talk about the importance of asking a question of the other person to try to find out what their real values are. And I just want to share that if we're asking a question and we hear an answer and we immediately go to a response, we failed. But if we ask a question, get an answer, and say something like, tell me more. What was your experience that caused you to have that feeling? Then we've entered into effective dialogue where we can learn without trying to react and sell our position through just a singular question with a singular answer.
Thank you,
Jack. Jack, what you're talking about
something.
to some extent is one of the basic skills exercises that Brave Angels has. You know, like one of the other techniques would be paraphrasing what the person said, so they understand that you understood them, so or heard them. So, yeah, good point. I saw Ann's hand.
Rick Heidick has his hand up.
Oh, okay, Ann does too. So
I think Ann was first. Yeah, go ahead, Ann.
Ann, you're muted.
Rick wanted to get a word in.
There you go, Ann.
Sorry.
Ann?
The idea of trying to hear their values is a good way to try to understand people, but sometimes it's very simple just to repeat what they said, so they know you said it and you get it. So in the last one, you could just say, you agree that climate is changing, but you don't see that there's anything that we need to do about it, which already tells you that you have some connection with them. you had said climate is changing and we need to do something about it desperately. And they said, no, I agree that climate is changing, but we don't have to do anything about it. So once you discover you have something in common, you can say, oh, we agree. We agree on that.
Agreed.
And with one difference, that I think we should do something about it, and you don't see that. And the tone of voice is so important, because if the tone of your voice is, and boy, that's really a stupid position, all of us can do very well and practice it a lot. So my fallback when I don't get the values, I'm not sure that's the right one, and I might be assuming something or being pushy. I just repeat what they said. And I think when people understand that you know what they said, there's a lot of, they can relax a little. And then you can go for what you agree on. And in that case, it's very easy. We agree that climate is.
Thank you. Rick.
Yeah, I learned a lot, and especially, appreciating the different values, but everything, one of the things that I'm kind of taking away is that we're focusing on the political polarization, which is, from the examples, these are hot topics. And so there's obviously a conservative viewpoint and a liberal viewpoint and things like that. But like what you're saying is that all of us have, if you're liberal, you have conservative elements. If you're conservative, you have liberal elements. But the other thing is it goes way beyond politics, is that we all have, if you go down your core values, we all have, elements of everything on here. And these aren't conservative or liberal values. These are just human values. And so when you start talking about this and you start learning about how to deal with the polarization politically, it can take you to, especially with Rotary, a lot of different levels because people can be judgmental in many ways, which causes problems. There can be racial, judgments. There can be judgments about, economics. There can be, homeless. So when we start accepting the values of people who disagree with us politically, it opens the door that we can respect the multitude of values of people that are just different than us, that are different. What values does a homeless person have? What difference does, a person of a different faith have? And so it opens the door for at least respecting that, that anybody has a number of different values, and we can be open about that and we can respect that.
Very good, Rick. That's really the point of all this, is that we all have these values. There's just, some of us put a greater priority on one or another, but we all have the same values. And it's important to hear those values when we're talking with another person. Rick Olson, you want to take us home?
Yes, as we began this evening, we talked about polarization and so forth. We just have to remember that we all are a product of either our DNA, our background, or whatever. So we come to where we are today. And so knowing that we've had different backgrounds, we're bound to have different values to some extent, or different weights on those values and different beliefs and so forth. So I guess the bottom line is, let's be gentle with one another and try to do those ideas of honesty and respect and honesty, all those kinds of things we talked about before, right back down to the Rotary 4-way test. So one of the things we talked about was the pledge, it was in the chat box. If you could do that, that would be great if you so choose. Also, putting in the chat box a link to a survey, but that will, Kathy, will also be sending that out in an email as well. We are all learning. When we put this exercise together, we had no real guidance from braver angels on exactly how we're supposed to conduct this. And so I've got to thank Bruce Marlin and Bruce McKenzie for joining me in this effort. Did we do it perfectly? No, that's life. We keep on learning. So thank you for participating. And if you are interested in trying to do step 2 or step 3, there's a question of that on the questionnaire, or you could reach us directly. And but I know the charge from the District Ethics Committee is to put on the step 2 and step 3 on a district-wide basis. And so those will be structured workshops. And so we'll be using other people's learning on that one. So thanks again tonight, and have a good night.